Hello and welcome to Mumsnet's first ever YouTube Live. I'm really excited to say hello to our Mumsnet Influencer Network, and I'm here today with Wura from the ASA to talk about all things influencer marketing guidelines and regulations, where we're going to be talking about things like hashtag ad, whether it's sponsored, is it gifted, and how do you make sure that your content is compliant. Thank you so much for joining us for this. I think this is a really interesting and really important conversation to be having, especially in the current climate.
Definitely.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your role at the ASA to kick off?
Thank you. So my name is Wura and I work for the ASA. I work in the investigations team. So my team is responsible for investigating complaints that we receive about advertising, and we work with advertisers to determine whether there's been a breach of the advertising rules, and we can either work with them informally or formally.
Okay, and just for anyone who might not be aware, who are the ASA?
So the ASA are the Advertising Standards Authority, and we're the UK regulator of advertising. So we regulate everything from TV advertising to social media to leaflets, billboard campaigns.
So everything.
There are a few things that are outside of remit, but near enough everything.
And overall, kind of how many complaints do you get a year, do you think, as a company? Is it something people actually do write in about?
Yeah, so we receive thousands of complaints. I don't have exact figures, but it's definitely over the tens of thousands.
Wow, okay. Some disgruntled people out there. And how long has the ASA been around?
Over 50 years, so yes.
Wow, so very established. Okay. We only have 20 minutes today. Do make sure that you're getting your questions for Wura or myself as Head of Influence Marketing here at Mumsnet, and we can answer as many as we can get through today live. But I think probably the big question everyone's asking is, why do we have these guidelines?
So our aim is to ensure that every UK ad is responsible. The rules are in place to maintain trust in advertising and also to protect consumers from ads that may be misleading, that may be harmful and may offend them. We hold all advertising to the same standards, so whether you're an individual or you're a business, our aim is to make sure that all UK ads are responsible.
Okay. And where can somebody find these guidelines?
So we have a sister body called CAP, and there's lots and lots of resources available on our website. So we have an online resource library, and that covers everything from weight loss claims to gambling to alcohol ads. We've recently launched a podcast. We offer e-learning modules for advertisers or influencers. They can contact our copy advice team, and they review ads for free. They can provide answers to questions that anybody may have. So lots of details available, and I can provide those to you.
Do you have any idea what the turnaround time is? So if somebody comes to you and says, would you mind just looking over this Instagram post or the copy for my YouTube title for free?
Yeah. How
long do you think they should be waiting?
We aim to get back to advertisers within 24 hours.
Okay.
Sometimes it can take a little longer, but it's quite a quick turnaround. So
okay,
yes.
So definitely worth taking advantage of that. And what is the difference between, you're saying rules, I'm saying guidelines, are they the same thing?
So we have the advertising codes, and those are the rules. The rules cover everything from alcohol ads, misleading advertising, to a lot of the advertising that influencers do. And around those rules, we offer guidelines and guidance, which can help them, which interprets the rules and helps them understand what they mean, right, and exactly what they have to do. Okay.
So what's the difference between an ad, sponsored, gifted, in partnership with, hashtag SPA, hashtag SPON? I mean, there's so many different terms out there.
There's so many different terms. So for influencers, the most relevant rule to them is that ads should be obviously identifiable as such. And just to make sure we have the understanding of an ad correct, for the work that influencers do, for something to be classified as an advert, there has to be payment. So that can be monetary, or it can be payment of kind. So that could be a freebie. Mm-hmm. And there also has to be control. And that means that the brand has to control the content that the influencer has done. So as a general rule of thumb, if the influencer wasn't free to completely say or do what they wanted to do, the brand probably had some form of control over that content. So that could be telling them key messages to include in the post, or telling them what to say in the video. You may have recently seen that we ruled against Louise Thompson, mm-hmm. And that was an Instagram post where she was wearing a Daniel Wellington watch. And in that case, we were satisfied that there was payment and there was control. And the caption included a discount code. And so the challenge was whether or not the ad was obviously identifiable as such. And we ruled that it wasn't sufficiently clear that it was an ad. And we advised her to use a label such as #ad so that it would make sufficiently clear that it was an advert.
And that, going back to that element of control, that could be something. So say a brand sends an influencer, even somebody with just 10,000 followers, sends them a bunch of flowers or a watch, as the example you used, and there's no request for them to feature it on their channels. But maybe they just, in the letter saying, "Dear Joe Blogs, here's a bunch of flowers from flowers.com. Have a great day. We thought we'd brighten your day with some flowers." And then just in that sign off, they happen to put #brighten your day with flowers.com or whatever their hashtag is. And then the person uses that hashtag. Is that editorial control?
If there's been no requirement for that vlogger or influencer to include that in any of their posts, then it's likely that we would say there's been no control. Control is when the brand has, specifically said to them, you have to include this or you have to do that. In the example you provided, it sounds like the influencer is free to include the hashtag if they wish. The brand hasn't specified, and so it's unlikely that we would see that as control.
So that would be sponsored?
That would be sponsorship. With sponsorship, it's where the brand has paid for the association with the influencer, but there's been no control. But that's something that's not covered by the ASA, it's covered by the Competition and Markets Authority, and they have their own guidance as to what you do in those circumstances.
Okay. And the other thing that you talked about just then was how it's whether or not it's clear it's an ad or sponsored piece of content. Obviously, from the user perspective, or a consumer rather, they don't at the moment necessarily know that some people on social platforms or on a blog are doing paid partnerships with brands. So does it have to say #ad or can it say in partnership with?
So we're not prescriptive about the labels that influencers use, but we do say they have to be clear. It has to be clear that it is an advert. At the moment, the ASA hasn't ruled on specific platform tools such as Instagram's paid partnership. So I would advise that if you were to use that tool, you also include #ad. The ASA has said that #ad, #advertisement feature, or #advertisement is sufficient in some contexts. But I would steer clear away from things like #SP, #spawn, things like that.
Not a thing. Not a thing. That's someone speaking who works in the industry. Nobody knows what #spawn means.
Sponsored can mean different things in different contexts, and we think #ad is more clear. But as I said, we're not prescriptive. It just has to be clear, and people have to understand that the advertising that you are, what it is that you're posting.
Mm-hmm. And I think that it is hard sometimes when you're so in this influencer bubble. If you're somebody who's on YouTube or Instagram or whatever all the time, you do forget that someone who is maybe new to those platforms or whatever is going to come across your content. And if they don't get it, you could end up looking at the ASA knocking on your inbox, which nobody wants, as friendly as you appear to be. So I do think it's worth always making sure that you put yourself in that position of, if somebody was new to this platform and had never seen it before, would they understand that this is an ad or a sponsored piece of content?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a great way to put it. We say, consumers shouldn't have to do the detective work. It should be clear before they engage with the content that this is an ad, so they can make an informed decision about whether or not they want to engage with that post.
I'm just going to pause there for a sec, 'cause we've already got some questions coming in. Thank you guys, keep them coming. Alice says, is there a checklist for posting content as an ad? Do these only apply to the UK or are they worldwide?
So thank you for the question. For the first half, as I said, I mentioned the online resource library that's available on our website. There's lots and lots of different scenarios that are on there. So if you're posting on YouTube or if you're posting on Instagram, that gives advice about what you should follow there. I would also recommend, as I said, contact our copy advice team. They're really friendly. You can give them a call and they can advise you there. In terms of, is it UK advertising? So we are the UK regulator, and we regulate adverts that are aimed at UK consumers or that are influencers that are based in the UK.
So if you yourself were an influencer based in France, say, but the majority of your audience was in the UK, you would still need to be complying for that UK audience.
So yes, we look at, when we're determining whether or not it's within our remit, we look at whether the post is or the content is aimed at any UK audience. So if it contains the pound symbol, or again, as you mentioned, if your influencers, the majority of your audience is UK based, then it is likely they would fall within our remit.
Okay. And are there rules like this in other countries as well?
Yes, different countries have their own regulators as well. So France, the US have different regulators that regulate advertising.
Cool. Dear Bear and Beanie, hello.
Hi.
She's asked, hi, does the ad need to have a hashtag, or can you just do the word ad? And does it need to be at the start of the post, or can it go at the end?
So no, it doesn't need to include a hashtag, but it does need to be clear. So if it's on Instagram, for instance, if it's in the caption, we recommend a hashtag, but if it's a prominent word, then that would be sufficient. It could also be included in the image itself, because on Instagram there is the explore page, and so the caption is not always visible. Sorry, what was the second?
Does it need to go at the start or the end?
We say that it needs to be obvious. The rules say that it needs to be obviously identifiable. So we recommend it at the beginning of the post, or if it's on YouTube, it should be at the start of the description box or in the video itself. It needs to be obviously identifiable, so it shouldn't be lost in a sea of hashtags or at the end. So at the beginning, as long as it's prominent, then we're satisfied.
It's interesting you said about including it actually on the image on Instagram. I know that Mumsnet, when we have an ad on our YouTube channel, we include the word ad on the thumbnail. I haven't seen anybody including it on their Instagram images.
So it is in our guidance. We do recommend that depending on the context, you need to remember that it needs to be clear before a consumer engages. So particularly on Instagram, the caption itself is not always sufficient, because people could see the image without the caption, and so including it in the image is recommended.
There you go. And when it comes to blog posts, obviously it can be easier in some instances, because usually that blog is yours. You have a lot more control in terms of the format that you can present that declaration in. But Google doesn't always like it if you put ad at the front of your headline or your title of that blog post. Obviously, we would recommend that you do it anyway. But is there any way that you can help have that conversation with a brand and say, yes, it might be that Google spiders think that it's a less favourable post because it's an ad, but ultimately this is the right thing to do for consumers.
Yes, we understand that sometimes, brands and influencers want to be as creative as possible, but for our purposes, it has to be clear. So whilst it might not always be practical, we still recommend that it needs to be forefront, it needs to be clear before the consumer engages with that content. So.
And on blog posts as well, a lot of people will put that disclosure at the bottom.
Yes.
Is that the same as what you were talking about on an Instagram caption, Really, that needs to be that first line that you see.
It needs to be prominent, it needs to be clear. So something that's apparent at the bottom of a long blog post, people might not scroll to the bottom, and so it's likely that that's going to be seen in breach.
And if you're using images in that blog post, should they have ad ideally on that image, or
when we're talking about ad, it needs to be if all of the content relates to the ad, then labeling the top of the post will be sufficient, but only if only elements of the post relate to the ad. So if only you're promoting a project and it's in the image, then labeling that image would be okay.
And one of the things a lot of our vloggers do, I feel like I'm just firing questions at you, sorry.
It's fine.
One of the other things our vloggers do is they might do a weekly vlog once a week, and then they'll have segments within that, and one of those segments may happen to be an ad, and the rest is totally editorial. So what we're seeing is that they will put on the screen at the moment that ad appears, where they feature that product they've been testing that week or whatever, it'll come up on the screen saying ad or paid partnership. And then obviously that goes away for the rest of the weekly vlog. Is that okay? Or should it have ad across the whole of that vlog so that it's clear at the start of the vlog that actually there's going to be an ad at some point throughout this?
So we would recommend best practice would be to include it in the title of the video as well. But if only part of that video relates to the ad, then signposting that element would be sufficient. But again, it is for the ASA Council to rule in these things. So whilst I can advise you, it's until we have a ruling on these things. Yeah.
So you haven't had complaints about everything yet?
We haven't had complaints about everything. I mentioned the Instagram paid promotion. We haven't actually ruled on that as of yet. So it's until we have a ruling on that we can definitively say yes or no. But up until that point, we can just advise best practice.
Okay. Ali's also got us a question. Hello, Ali.
Hello.
What about if a brand sends you something to share on social media, but they don't tell you specifically what to post? Is there still control there? Should it be marked as ad, or is hashtag gift okay?
We generally stay away from hashtag gift. Again, it can mean different things. It's not sufficiently clear that it is advertising. I should mention that we are actually at the moment conducting public research into what consumers understand. So later this year, if we find out that our position is wrong, then we'll change that. But at the moment, hashtag gift isn't sufficient. But in the scenario that you've explained, so a brand has sent you something and the only condition is that you post it on social media, you aren't exactly free to do what you want. There's still that stipulation that you have to do something. So it is likely that will be seen as control, and so hashtag ads should be included in that instance.
And to Ali's question, if they haven't specifically said that you post on social, I think from my perspective, as kind of on the other side of the fence to you, truth be told, they're not sending it to you on the hope that you don't post it.
Yes.
They're hoping you're going to post it. It's a PR stunt. It's a press drop. So ultimately, you've got to be a little bit savvy about this, I think, and think with your kind of business hat on. Actually, they may not have said an Instagram post or a tweet. Great, yeah, that'd be good. Ultimately, that's what they're looking for, even if they haven't stated it. So even if you at least put sponsored, even if it's not an ad, because that would be no control if they haven't asked for it.
Yeah, if there's no control, if they haven't said, if you're free to do whatever you want, then it's likely that will be seen as sponsorship. But if there is some type of term or condition, if they're telling you to do something, then that is likely to amount to editorial control.
Right. So hopefully that makes that a bit clearer. And from our experience, what we're seeing, users are discussing this all the time on the boards on Mumsnet, who are not influencers and they don't really understand. And gifted is one of the ones that they come up with that they're just like, but what? And hashtag SP and hashtag spawn. They don't get that. So don't use them.
I agree, but we're here to work with advertisers and influencers. There's lots of resources available, and ultimately, we want to ensure that every ad is responsible. So drop us a call, go onto our website, and we're happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
We've only got 4 minutes left, guys. So if you've got any more questions, make sure you're getting them in quick. And the last probably big FAQ that we get is what happens if you're found to not be compliant at the end of a complaint?
So we don't fine advertisers, but our legal backstop is trading standards. So if there is a non-compliant advertiser, ultimately we would refer them to trading standards. But a lot of complaints don't reach that stage. Most advertisers are compliant or quick to withdraw ads that are found to be in breach. In the first instance, we have our weekly rulings. So every Wednesday we publish rulings on our website, and before they're published, they're sent to journalists under embargo. And a lot of the time they can generate quite bad press for advertisers that are seen in breach. So in most instances, that's enough for advertisers to comply. But we also work with social media companies, and they can withdraw content that's seen to be in breach. We can also remove paid-for search ads or publish our own paid-for campaign to highlight non-compliant advertisers.
Okay. And is there anything else from the ASA's perspective that you would like our influencers to know or to be taking on board? Is there anything you feel we haven't covered today?
I think we've covered most bases, but I would just say, if it is an ad, if you are being told to do something, and if you are being paid for that content, then it needs to be clear. Consumers shouldn't have to dig to find out what it is. So include hashtag ad. But if you're unclear, just give us a call, go onto our website. There's lots of resources available, and we're happy to help.
Cool. From our perspective, on the kind of influencer marketing agency side of things, we would say similar thing. It's all about building integrity in this industry. It's a very new area. Nobody really knows kind of how this is going to end up in the next few years, and we kind of all need to work together.
Yes.
In the same way that TV and print 50, 60 years ago,
definitely,
it was still finding its feet as well, and we need to do the same and make sure that we've all got jobs in a few years.
So yeah, it's an evolving area.
Oh, we've got one last question, got in there just in time, Bear. She says, or he, sorry, what about press trips? Most people use hashtag press trip. Is that sufficient?
Again, so a press trip would be seen as a freebie, so it would be seen as a payment in kind, and therefore there is payment. Hashtag press trip, we haven't ruled on it, but personally I don't think it is sufficiently clear, so I would steer away from that. But again, give our copy advice a call and they can provide more advice on that.
Cool. So the upshot of today, ad with or without the hashtag, and sponsored with or without an hashtag. They're the way to go. Thank you so much for joining. We do actually have a guest post with Wura going live later this week where we'll be covering off a couple of things that we haven't managed to talk about today, and any questions that you have if you're watching later that we haven't managed to get to, let us know and we will try and cover them off in our guest post on mumsnet.com. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been very enlightening. I hope you found it too.
Thank you for having me. Bye.